There was one moment where Trump was presented with his own words and given a pretty big off-ramp to either downplay or clarify some of the most authoritarian stuff he has ever said. But instead of taking that off-ramp, here's what happened.
Let's watch it.
If we have to.
Yeah.
We have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries, because if you have a smart president, he can handle them pretty easily. But the thing that's tougher to handle are these lunatics that we have inside, like Adam Schiff. I call him the enemy from within.
Mr. President, Kamala Harris has said you sounded unhinged and unchecked power is in our future. What do you say about that?
I thought it was a nice presentation. I wasn't unhinged.
A nice presentation of explicit fascism. But you wouldn't know it from the laughter in the Fox audience. And Trump didn't stop there. He doubled down.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. They're dangerous for our country. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled. The more difficult are, the Pelosi's, these people, they're so sick and they're so evil. They're the threat to democracy.
This is a question.
I'm glad I got that out.
Glad I got that out. Quite clearly, Trump's authoritarian rhetoric here is not a mistake. It is his sales pitch. And Kamala Harris's strategy in these closing weeks of the campaign is to use Trump's sales pitch against him. Today, the Wall Street Journal reports that Harris has told her campaign staff that with less than 3 weeks to go, she wants to turn Trump's own words back on him. But Harris isn't just using Trump's words to rile up her base. She's also using them to reach across the aisle. Over the past few weeks, Harris has made a concerted effort to hold events with current and former Republicans, using Trump's authoritarian sales pitch to show the kind of person who may have been a Nikki Haley voter just a year ago that Trump is not just another Republican, but something else, something much more dangerous. Tonight, Vice President Harris went on Fox to deliver her message to that network's decidedly conservative audience. At one point in the interview, Trump's enemy from within comments came up, and as if he were trying to fact check her, Bayer played Harris a clip of Trump from today's town hall, a clip that totally omitted Trump doubling down on his authoritarian rhetoric. Well, Kamala Harris wasn't having any of it.
An enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you...
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes. Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump...
The significance of that.
Joining us now, Sarah Matthews, who served as deputy press secretary in the Trump administration before resigning on January 6th. She endorsed Kamala Harris this week. Also joining me, former Virginia Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, who has endorsed Vice President Harris and appeared on stage alongside her in Pennsylvania today. Thank you both for joining me. I'm so eager to get your perspective on everything that's transpired today. Congresswoman Comstock, I'd love to get just kind of your thoughts. I mean, first on this exchange with Bret Baier, I've not seen the vice president that angry and that incensed in an interview, maybe this entire election cycle. And I wonder if you think her comments break through with the very Republicans she may be trying to target and going on Fox in the first place.
Well, I hope so, because Fox doesn't have Republicans on very often. They certainly don't have me or Republicans, like Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger. I don't imagine they invite Sarah on very often anymore, because if they do invite people like that, they get attacked by Donald Trump. And Bret Baier himself has gotten attacked by Donald Trump so much that the morning after the election, I believe it was the morning after the election, Bret Baier, it was shown in emails during that whole lawsuit that they had. He was one of the ones who was arguing, hey, maybe we should pull back the call on Arizona. Can we do that? Because they were getting so much blowback from their audience and attacks from Trump. So this is what happens. Fox gets attacked, Trump bullies everybody, and he knows darn well that Trump has bullied and attacked people and made exactly the kind of threats that the vice president talked about today at the rally that I attended. And his own people, the reason Donald Trump is not supported by the dozens and dozens of people who worked for him, people like Mark Esper, people like Dan Coates, people like Mark Milley, people like Jim Mattis, all those national security people who didn't work for him, they know he made these kind of outrageous statements. Mark Esper has been on other networks, not on Fox, making that same case that the vice president is making. And Bret Baier won't be showing those kind of things on air. I dare Fox News and Bret Baier to have Mark Esper, to have people like me, to have people like Sarah Matthews and Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger on there. But they won't do it because they'll get beat up by Donald Trump, who they gave all that free airtime to.
Sarah, as a comms person, I do wonder, there's such a clear sort of Earth 1, Earth 2 reality versus parallel reality, facts versus paranoia sort of divide in American culture right now. The editing that you saw in that file, Bret Baier plays his version of what Trump said about the enemy within, which doesn't include Trump doubling down on this notion of the enemy within. And then there's what Trump actually said in that town hall, which was doubling down on the notion of an enemy within. And I just wonder whether you think an exchange like that is enough to pierce the veil of secrecy or the veil of, partisanship that is often, it's the bubble that these, potential Nikki Haley supporters live in who watch Fox News, that the persuadable Republicans still exist in, that Kamala Harris is trying to appeal to. I mean, do you think this makes a difference?
Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference, actually. I think it's really important that Kamala Harris went into the Lion's Den and she knew that this was going to be a tough interview and it might not necessarily be fair, like you pointed out, with the deceptive editing on Bret Baier's part, which him and his team should be ashamed of, in my opinion, quite frankly, because I know that they know better. But she was right to call him out. And I thought that that was a really powerful moment. And so for those in the Fox News audience who were watching who might not have been familiar with these remarks, they might have saw her push back on this and they might have thought to themselves, what am I not being shown? And maybe they went home and Googled it and maybe they saw the remarks for themselves and saw him double down on it. And so that's why I think it was so important for her to go make the case on a network that maybe, might not necessarily be friendly to her. But I thought she did a fantastic job. Yeah, some of her answers maybe weren't, 100% her best. But I thought that moment in particular where she called out Bret Baier with the deceptive editing was really powerful.
Can I ask, and I want to follow up with you for a second, Sarah, there is a phenomenon we're seeing from people who are prominent Trump critics. They are finally making the jump to actually endorsing Kamala Harris. I know you endorsed the vice president this week, and I wonder if you can talk to me and our audience a little bit about the sort of decision-making process there. Why now? And if you're trying to sort of imagine, being in the shoes of those, Nikki Haley voters or on-the-fence Republicans that Harris is trying to appeal to, what do you think the calculation is at this stage in the game, less than 3 weeks before Election Day?
Yeah, I had actually previously endorsed President Biden when he was still in the race, and had endorsed VP Harris shortly thereafter, after she entered the race. But I've been a little bit more vocal about it as of late, because right now, this is the time when people are tuning into the election. People are tuning in 20 days out. And for those undecideds who might be on the fence, those disaffected Republicans that Harris is trying to appeal to, I think it's really important for them to see Republican voices out there saying enough is enough. We need to turn the page on Donald Trump, and to say, hey, it's okay to put policy aside in this one election and cast a ballot for Kamala Harris. Because, look, I've never voted for a Democrat a day in my life, but I think that right now, in this moment, I'm prioritizing the Constitution and character. And so I'm willing to say we might not agree on everything in the VP's agenda, but I think that she is someone who will uphold the Constitution. I think she is someone that our children will look up to and aspire to be like. I don't think anyone would hope that their children looks up to Donald Trump and would emulate his behavior. And so I'm hopeful that this message will resonate with some of those Republicans or independents who might be on the fence, who are thinking about sitting this election out and staying on the couch or leaving the top of their ballot blank, that it is okay to cross that party line and to vote for a Democrat, because I think that enough is enough with Donald Trump, and we're sick of the division and the chaos that he brings.